Europe, 1944. Amid the thunder of war, a young American engineer hides a secret device inside a dusty field tent, a radio forbidden by his own commanders. While others relied on static and hope, his signal pierced the chaos, reaching 40 times farther than any military-issue set. What he created would change everything about communication and nearly cost him his life. Before we begin, subscribe to honor the untold stories of history, because this one hides a truth the U.S. Army tried to bury. New Jersey, 1939. The world stood on the edge of chaos, but inside the Signal Corps laboratories at Fort Monmouth, all was quiet. Too quiet. Rows of engineers hunched over workbenches, soldering iron tips glowing in the dim light. Among them was a young man named Harold Whitmore, 26 years old, with the kind of curiosity that refused to sleep. He believed radio was more than wires and frequency. It was lifeblood. Yet the Army saw it as a checklist item, bound by procedure and bureaucracy. Communication between field units had long suffered from dead zones, static, and unreliable range. In battle, seconds could decide life or death, and those seconds were being lost to silence. Whitmore spent long evenings staring at the flickering tubes of an experimental transmitter, one he'd quietly modified beyond official specifications. His supervisor warned him, "You're not here to rewrite the manual, Whitmore." But the young engineer couldn't accept mediocrity. He was studying frequency modulation, FM, a radical technology pioneered by Edwin Armstrong. FM offered clearer signals and resistance to interference, but the military brass called it unstable, unnecessary, and impractical. Still, in the dim after hours, Whitmore rewired circuits, whispering to himself, "If it can cross the Atlantic, it can cross the battlefield." He tested frequencies illegally, bouncing signals off nearby hills and river valleys, mapping their reach in secret notebooks. Each experiment proved one thing: the Army's limits were self-imposed. Life around him went on. Drills in the parade yard, music from the barracks, soldiers laughing under the hum of distant radio plays. But for Whitmore, that peace was only surface deep. War clouds gathered overseas, and the whispers of invasion grew louder every month. When Hitler's forces marched across Europe, Whitmore knew America's entry was inevitable. He wanted to be ready, not with a rifle, but with a signal strong enough to cut through the noise of war. His colleagues joked that his obsession would get him transferred to kitchen duty. But when he tuned that forbidden transmitter and heard his own voice echo back, crystal clear from miles away, he realized he'd done something no one else had. He didn't yet know it, but that illegal experiment would one day save lives and almost destroy his own. The calm before the storm wasn't peace. It was the sound of wires humming beneath silence, a rebellion against the ordinary. Cliffhanger. Could one engineer's defiance survive the bureaucracy of war? December 7th, 1941, the day the Pacific burned. The news crackled across every radio in America. Pearl Harbor had been attacked. Within hours, the United States plunged into war. At Fort Monmouth, Harold Whitmore's quiet lab became a storm. Soldiers were drafted overnight, engineers reassigned to military projects, and deadlines shortened from months to days. The Signal Corps was under immense pressure to build, test, and deploy communication systems faster than the enemy could jam them. Every corridor buzzed with urgency. Blueprints littered the floors. Whitmore, now a junior technician, was ordered to help produce the SCR 536 handy-talkie, a small but notoriously limited field radio. It could barely reach a mile under ideal conditions, and much less in forests or city ruins. For an infantryman, that meant isolation. Whitmore proposed an alternative in an internal memo: adopt FM transmission for long-range clarity. His proposal was rejected within 48 hours. The note from command was short: FM impractical under combat strain. Focus on production quotas. So, Whitmore did what few dared. He ignored them. In secret, he began building a prototype transmitter using spare aircraft tubes, old receiver coils, and scavenged components labeled for disposal. He hid the parts in a crate marked medical supplies. Late at night, he stayed behind after curfew, his hands blackened with solder, his eyes burning from fatigue. He was building what the Army called impossible, a compact transmitter with 40 times the range of standard field sets. He ran simulations, each result more promising than the last. Rumors began to spread. There's an engineer running ghost experiments after hours. A sergeant joked that Whitmore was trying to talk to Mars. But others whispered admiration, because in war, desperation needs dreamers. Then came the telegram that changed everything. Whitmore was reassigned to Europe, not as a soldier, but as a field technician embedded with the 101st Airborne Division. His mission: maintain communications during the invasion to come. He knew it was his only chance to test his device in combat conditions. Before boarding, a friend pulled him aside. "You know they'll court-martial you if you use that thing, right?" Whitmore smiled faintly. "If it works, they'll thank me later." The train pulled away toward the coast. Outside, factories churned, soldiers saluted, and the world braced for war. Inside Whitmore's duffel bag, beneath his rations and uniform, the forbidden transmitter waited. Cliffhanger. Would the war crush his secret or reveal its power? Normandy, June 6, 1944. The night air was alive with thunder, anti-aircraft fire streaking across the sky, the sea beneath black and boiling. Paratroopers of the 101st Airborne leapt into the unknown, scattered by wind and enemy flak. Among them, Harold Whitmore clutched a metal case disguised as standard gear. Inside lay his forbidden creation. When he hit the ground, chaos surrounded him. Explosions lit the fields like lightning. Squads were scattered miles from their drop zones. Radios failed across the countryside. Too much interference, too little range. Soldiers screamed into dead air. In a crater near St. Mir-Eglise, Whitmore met Captain Reed, his skeptical commanding officer. Reed barked, "We've lost contact with every unit north of here. We're blind." Whitmore hesitated, then opened his case. "Sir, I think I can fix that." Inside, gleaming faintly, was his FM transmitter. Illegal, unauthorized, but alive. Reed frowned. "That's not regulation." Whitmore only said, "Neither is losing this war." He rigged an antenna from torn parachute cord and copper scrap. The captain watched as Whitmore powered the unit. Static filled the air, then clarity. A distant voice cut through. "This is Able Company, position secure." For the first time since landing, command had eyes and ears again. Messages flooded in from across miles of hedgerows. Artillery units recalibrated. Medics found the wounded. Platoons converged on objectives once thought lost. By dawn, the 101st Airborne had regained coordination, something impossible hours before. Officers called it a miracle. Whitmore knew it was science. But as reports reached headquarters, questions followed. Who authorized this equipment? Why wasn't it cleared through procurement? The Army's obsession with hierarchy didn't vanish overnight. Whitmore's signal had broken enemy jamming, but it had also broken protocol. When Captain Reed confronted him, Whitmore simply replied, "If following the rules means silence, I'd rather be heard." By sunrise, the beaches of Normandy were secured. Thousands lived because one engineer refused to obey. Yet Whitmore's triumph came with a shadow. His frequency had been detected. German intercept units were listening. Somewhere in the French countryside, enemy antennas turned toward his forbidden signal. Cliffhanger. Would the Army celebrate his success or silence it to preserve control? Days after D-Day, Allied momentum surged inland. The hedgerows of Normandy became battlefields of mud and blood. Communication dictated survival, and Whitmore's transmitter became an unspoken lifeline among field commanders. Yet officially, it didn't exist. The 101st Airborne faced its harshest test during the Battle of Corentin, a brutal confrontation to link the beachheads. Standard radios struggled to penetrate terrain and artillery interference. But Whitmore's device cut through perfectly, coordinating movements between paratroopers and armored divisions in real time. The results were undeniable: fewer friendly fire incidents, faster maneuvers, precise air support. The miracle signal, soldiers called it. But miracles invite scrutiny. Within days, a colonel from the War Department arrived. His orders: investigate unauthorized transmissions. Whitmore was summoned under guard. In a tent reeking of gunpowder and sweat, he faced interrogation. "Who gave you permission to alter government property?" the colonel demanded. Whitmore stood his ground. "Sir, men are alive because of that property." The colonel reviewed the logs, recordings, and field results. He couldn't deny the data: clear, stable communication under fire. Still, military order demanded punishment. The verdict: cease all unauthorized transmissions immediately. That night, as shells rained over Corentin, Captain Reed found Whitmore staring at the silent radio. "Orders are orders," Reed muttered. Whitmore looked up, eyes hollow. "So are last rites." When German tanks advanced at dawn, Whitmore defied the command. He reactivated the transmitter, directing artillery fire through his frequency. The enemy offensive collapsed under pinpoint bombardment. Commanders hailed the defense as a tactical masterpiece. But when they traced the signal, they found the truth: they'd been saved by the very man they'd tried to silence. The colonel left without a word, his report classified. Whitmore's name disappeared from official channels, but whispers spread through the ranks. The forbidden radio had saved Corentin. Yet every victory carries a cost. The Germans were listening, adapting, hunting the source. Cliffhanger: how far would he go before command shut him down? Summer 1944. The war dragged through the hedgerows and fields of northern France. Whitmore and a small team of operators traveled with frontline units, patching broken lines, stringing makeshift antennas from trees and bombed-out houses. They worked in secrecy, part science, part survival. Every transmission risked discovery. The enemy had begun triangulating unusual frequencies, hunting for the source of the ghost radio. But for soldiers trapped under fire, that signal was the difference between rescue and annihilation. On July 3rd, near Saint-Lô, the nightmare arrived. German artillery found their relay site after intercepting their signal. The barrage came without warning. Explosions tore through the farmhouse they were using as cover. 2 operators, Sergeant Mills and Corporal Dyer, were killed instantly. The transmitter lay twisted in the rubble, its tube shattered, wires hissing smoke. Whitmore sat amid the wreckage, rain and ash mixing on his face. He whispered, "Maybe they were right. Maybe I should have stopped." Captain Reed found him there, hands trembling. "You can't blame yourself," Reed said. "You didn't pull the trigger." But Whitmore couldn't let go. Guilt consumed him. That night, under a leaking roof, he stared at the broken machine. Then, faint through the static, came a voice, a platoon trapped behind enemy lines, calling for help. The official radios couldn't hear them. Only his damaged prototype could. That sound reignited him. Whitmore scavenged what parts he could: battery scraps, melted copper, fragments of burned wire. He rebuilt the transmitter piece by piece through the night, his fingers bleeding. When he powered it on, the signal flickered, weak but alive. "We hear you," he transmitted. "Hold on." That message reached command, and rescue units moved out. The trapped soldiers were saved. The forbidden signal had saved them again. At dawn, military police arrived. Headquarters had learned of the incident. Their orders were clear: confiscate the transmitter and place Whitmore under review. Whitmore stood between them and the radio, rain pouring down, mud splashing around his boots. He didn't resist, but the look in his eyes told them this wasn't over. Cliffhanger: would his creation be destroyed or smuggled to safety? Rain drummed on canvas as the MPs hauled Whitmore's transmitter into headquarters. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, mud, and bureaucracy. A dozen officers surrounded the table where his invention lay under a tarp, its copper guts glinting through torn fabric like a wounded animal. A major from Washington spoke first. "Mr. Whitmore, you stand accused of violating Signal Corps protocol, unauthorized frequency use, and endangerment of classified operations." Whitmore didn't flinch. "And saving 112 men at Saint-Lô. Don't forget that part." Silence. The colonel presiding over the hearing, a veteran with scarred knuckles, studied the data reports scattered before him. Your radio outperformed every authorized model by a factor of 40. Explain how. Whitmore leaned forward. Frequency modulation. It rejects interference. It carries clarity through chaos. The technology already exists. The Army just refuses to use it. The room buzzed with unease. Innovation and insubordination rarely shared the same sentence. After hours of testimony, the colonel dismissed him with an unreadable stare. Return to quarters. Await orders. That night, Whitmore expected confinement. Instead, a message arrived, hand-delivered, and signed. Your equipment is being reassigned to a classified testing unit. Report to Bastogne. Tell no one. Whitmore folded the note slowly. Outside, the rain eased into silence. Somewhere, unseen hands were turning his punishment into potential. Cliffhanger. Was he being protected or erased? Bastogne, December 1944. The Ardennes lay under ice and artillery. The 101st Airborne was surrounded, cut off, freezing, nearly out of ammunition. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. Whitmore's reassignment placed him back among the same men he'd once saved. But now he carried a new model of his transmitter, rebuilt from memory under top-secret supervision. Smaller, stronger, tuned to pierce the snow-choked air. For 6 days, fog and German fire blinded Allied positions. Standard radios failed again, cold batteries, jammed circuits. Inside a bombed-out cellar, Whitmore warmed frozen wires against his breath, coaxing his device to life. Try it now, Captain Reed said through chattering teeth. Whitmore adjusted the dial. A hiss, then a miracle. This is 10th Armored Division. We read you. Relief swept the cellar. Coordinates poured in. Air support aligned. Whitmore's signal-guided supply drops that kept Bastogne alive when surrender seemed certain. On the 7th night, German artillery zeroed in on the transmission source. Shells slammed the street above, shaking dust from the rafters. Whitmore refused to stop. If he goes silent, they die. He transmitted until the final battery died in his hands. The next morning, Patton's Third Army broke through the siege. The victory was celebrated in headlines, but Whitmore's name was absent once more. Classified, forgotten. In the cold stillness, Reed clapped him on the shoulder. History may not print your name, he said, but every man here will remember your voice. When the war ended, the parades rolled, the medals shone, and Whitmore vanished into the crowd. The Signal Corps reclaimed his equipment and stamped every document top secret, experimental. Back in New Jersey, he returned to the same lab where it had all begun. New faces filled the benches, young engineers trained on peacetime projects. When he mentioned FM transmission, they nodded politely, unaware they were speaking to its quiet pioneer. He received a letter marked Notice of Termination, Project Closure. No commendation, no pension bonus, just silence. At night, he tuned civilian radios, hearing his own technology echo through commercial stations. FM had exploded worldwide, crystal clear, interference-free. It was the future he dreamed of, but not the one he was credited for. Sometimes he imagined those battlefield nights. Reed's voice, the hiss of snow, the faint replies of soldiers he'd never meet again. He'd given the Army a miracle, and the Army had buried it. In 1948, he walked to the ocean near Asbury Park, carrying his last prototype wrapped in canvas. Witnesses later said they saw him set it on the water, watch it drift, and whisper something before turning away. He never spoke of the war again, but the frequencies he unleashed were already circling the globe, unclaimed, unstoppable. Decades later, military historians uncovered fragments of a forgotten file, Project Signal Ghost, Experimental Field Comms, 1944. Inside were diagrams matching Whitmore's sketches, test logs from Bastogne, and a single handwritten note. Unauthorized genius. Results undeniable. Modern engineers analyzed the recovered data. They confirmed it. Whitmore's transmitter used true FM decades before it became military standard. His work had predated official adoption by almost 10 years. Documentaries, Declassified reports and veterans' testimonies began to surface. An old soldier from the 101st recalled, "We didn't know his name back then. We just knew the man who could make the sky talk." In 1972, the Signal Corps quietly added a line to its archives. Field communications, FM adaptation, uncredited civilian engineer, Whitmore H. No ceremony followed. No medal arrived. But for the historians who pieced it together, Whitmore's story became something larger than recognition. It became a parable of innovation born from defiance. Every modern tactical radio, every satellite uplink, every encrypted battlefield transmission still carries the legacy of that forbidden spark. The man the Army silenced had taught the world how to listen. History often remembers the generals, not the engineers, the speeches, not the static between them. But behind every victory lies a signal, fragile, human, defiant. Harold Whitmore's story isn't just about circuits and frequencies. It's about one mind refusing to surrender to mediocrity. When war demanded obedience, he answered with invention. When silence meant death, he gave soldiers a voice across chaos. Innovation rarely begins with permission. It begins with someone asking, "What if?" and daring to test the answer. Whitmore's transmitter never bore his name, yet its legacy shaped every modern communication system that followed. Today, in the hum of a radio, the crackle of a walkie-talkie, the whisper of a distant broadcast, you can still hear the echo of that forbidden signal. His courage was measured not in medals, but in megahertz. His rebellion didn't end a war, but it changed how wars and lives would be saved forever. Because in every age, there are those who listen to rules, and those who listen to truth. Whitmore did both, and transmitted it to the world.